All right, welcome everyone to our Introduction to Holacracy webinar. I'm Brian Robertson. I'll be your host for the next 75 minutes. We've got about 45 minutes for the webinar and the rest of the time for Q&A. So before we get started, let me call your attention to our chat panel. You should see a button in your Zoom window there for chat. If you click that, it'll pop up a chat. Please do say hello and let us know where you're connecting in from today, just to get you used to using that chat and give me a sense of where you all are from today. So go ahead and say hello in that chat. You should find that chat button there and tell me where you're connecting from. In addition to that, once you found the chat, take a look at the Q&A. You should see a little Q&A, Q in a folder icon. And if you click that, you can put your questions in there. And we'll save those for the end of our webinar when we have a time block to answer as many questions as we have time to get through. So please do use questions in the Q&A and any comments or any chat you might want to share in the chat. And I see we've got a pretty broad group here. Wonderful. Mexico, California, Switzerland, California, Peru, Sweden, Romania, New York, wow, England, all over the world. Welcome, everyone. I'm today in Philadelphia. I spent a lot of time on the road sharing this holacracy thing with the world. But today I'm at home right outside of Philly. And it's my goal today to give you a taste, a whirlwind tour. There's more to this holacracy thing than I can possibly cover in 45 minutes, but I'm going to do the best I can to at least give you a glimpse of it, of what it's about, and a sense of it, and then some next steps if you want to dig deeper and learn more. So I'm Brian. I'm one of the key people behind this movement. I'm the author of the book on holacracy, and it was something that started for me in a software company that I ran many years ago. I started that company in 2001 with a sense that there's just got to be a better way to run an organization. I had been part of companies in the past, some pretty cool companies, but all of them left me feeling like I couldn't bring all of my talents, my voice, my perspectives, my insights. There was just so much in the way of innovating in any way in this system. And I didn't know what to do about it, but I had the urge to find a better way. So I left the companies I was working for, started my own software company, and used it as a laboratory. And over the next many years, I just experimented with all different techniques, ideas, theories, anything I could find to try to build a different kind of organization. And the result, after many years of experimentation, is what we now call holacracy. And I left that software company in about 2007 to take this practice of holacracy and mature it and grow it and spread it all over the world. And I've been doing that since then in the organization I work with now, Holacracy One. So before I start, let me share a story just about one of my own realizations to frame some of this. And this is a true story. If you've read my book, I start the book with this story as well. I'm a private pilot. I have a pilot license. And when I was first learning to fly a plane, I had a rather scary experience. It was my first student solo cross-country flight. In other words, the first time I'm flying before I got my license as a student, hundreds of miles away from my home, and no instructor was with me. So I'm alone, I'm new, I'm nervous, and along the journey, the low voltage light comes on my instrument panel. And they don't teach student pilots much about the hardware of the plane. I barely knew how to fly the thing. And so I didn't really know what that meant, right? So my instinct, what I did, was I looked at all of the other instruments on my control panel. Right? I looked at my altimeter, and it said I'm not losing altitude, so there's no problem. I looked at my navigation aid, and it said I'm perfectly on course, nothing's wrong. I looked at my speed, airspeed's great, nothing wrong. Every other instrument on that panel said everything's fine, no anomalous readings. So I ignored it. I figured, if no other instruments reporting anything wrong, it must not be that big of a deal. And I let those other instruments outvote the low voltage light. Turned out that was a really bad idea. I nearly crashed the plane that day. I was lucky to make it down alive. It was a really bad experience that left me lost in a thunderstorm with no power, no lights, and violating international airspace. So lucky to make it down, but I learned a really valuable lesson, which was the low voltage light is tuned in to different information than all of the other instruments in my cockpit. And I probably shouldn't outvote even one lone sensor that sees something that no other instrument does. And then I realized in my quest to find a better way to organize, this was really soon after the first year of my software company I started, I realized by getting out of the management hierarchy I was in and becoming a CEO at the top of the management hierarchy, I didn't actually create a system where anyone who sensed anything could integrate it. I really even felt that way myself as a CEO. I felt like I couldn't get all of my insights, even as a CEO, pushed through this organization. There was something about the way we organize that just resisted change, that resisted ideas. So my quest, this was a bit of an inspiration for me. I guess nearly dying does that. But I was really hungry. How can I build an organization where we don't outvote the low voltage light, right? Where any one person who senses something that could be better can drive change with what they sense, even when no one else sees it. And yet without slowing down and wasting time pursuing things that just didn't matter, right? So how do you balance that? And that was what my experimentation was all about over the next many years. So let me ask a question, and I'll invite you to share the answer in the chat. Before I share my answer that I came up with, Holacracy, let me ask, when you think about this, what do you see as limiting people driving change in an organization today? What words or phrases come to mind? Just type them into the chat. What limits somebody from sensing something that could be better, right? When they're the low voltage light in a company today, what stops them from being able to drive change and improve the system? I find it really funny that I think 4 people just simultaneously typed fear. That's funny. Oh, and I see multiple people simultaneously typed ego. I think that says something. It's a great commentary, right? Just instantly, fear showed up on my screen all over. And other things too. I see politics, biases, consensus, what I call the tyranny of consensus, where everyone has a voice and no one can drive any change. We have fixed mindsets, yeah, that's for sure. Motivation issues. The sense of having no power, interesting, maybe different than the actuality of it, but that's for sure there, and sometimes the actuality too. What else? Bureaucracy, silos. So I ask this question a lot in a lot of different talks, and I hear these answers again and again and again. I hear the same answers no matter where in the world I am, no matter what the audience I'm talking to is. Big companies, small companies, for-profit, non-profit, doesn't matter. Same answers come up again and again and again. And that leads me to an interesting conclusion. I don't think that these issues are something going wrong with how we organize. It's affecting almost every organization in the world today, all over the world. It's culturally neutral. This stuff happens in any culture, right? It's not just something going off. It's a pretty universal issue. I think instead, I think our organizations today are perfectly designed to achieve these results. In other words, it's a feature, not a bug. It might not be quite an intentional feature, but I think there's something about the structure and the system we're in that leads to this. And no wonder these are hard. Think of the economic cost today that these issues are hitting in our world today, let alone the human cost. It's staggering, right? The number of organizations on the planet that are limited by this is huge, and we haven't solved it yet. That must mean it's a really deep issue. And I think it stems from what I found as I started experimenting. There was no single process I could add to the way I was organizing that totally got around these, or even really felt like it had much deep change on it. I could maybe alleviate symptoms, right? I could maybe take enough painkillers and not feel the pain of some of these for a little while in my company, but that's not the same as fixing the broken bone underneath the pain. And what I realized for my own quest, my own search here, is if I wanted to really transcend these issues, I needed a much deeper level of change. Right? I needed to question the fundamental way we organize itself, the way we structure a company and the way power works, not just add a new process or add some new technique on top of the way the company is structured today. And the way we've been structuring organizations for, in its modern form, roughly a century now, is the management hierarchy. right? This is what underpins almost every organization in the world today. There is a way of breaking down power, and it starts with vesting power in somebody at the top of a hierarchy, and then theoretically, they break it down and delegate it. And I don't want to knock this. This has been one of the most successful ways of organizing in human history. It has, look at the world over the past century, the level of economic development, of the number of humans lifted out of poverty in the world in the past century has been staggering and higher than any point before in human history, thanks largely to organizations run this way. The reason we're sitting here today talking about alternatives to the management hierarchy is not because it's failed us, it's because it's been so wildly successful, it created challenges that it wasn't designed for. And that's what I found. I think so many of the issues that are really luxuries compared to the issues we suffered from 100 years ago, but the issues we suffer from in companies today, I think come back to this in a lot of cases. They stem from this underlying way of breaking down power. And that sent me on a quest to find other ways. How else can we break down power in an organization? How else can we decide who's going to do what? Right? We need the functions of the management hierarchy. Right? This breaks down work. It clarifies who's going to do what, who can make which decisions, what work should we do. There's important questions in there that any organization needs to answer. But there are other ways to answer them other than a management hierarchy. There's other ways to organize. Right? And that, in fact, is what Holacracy is. It's an alternative system, but it still is about structuring, right? It still answers the same questions the management hierarchy does. Who should do what? Who makes which decisions? How do you influence something in the organization? Right? These questions need answering, and Holacracy does give you a process to answer them. It's just a totally different process than the management hierarchy uses. And it's built around a different paradigm. And one that actually should be pretty familiar to us, right? If you look around us in most of modern society, most of what you do in a day outside of the workplace is not directed by a top-down ruler, right? It's not a boss telling you how to go to the grocery store and what to buy and where to shop and how to get there. And we don't need a supply chain management division in order for me to go take a taxi when I land in Dubai next week. I'm flying to Dubai. I can fly in. I can get a ride to a place to eat, to a place to sleep. That restaurant I go to, I can probably order a meal that has ingredients from all over the world. And there's no supply chain management department top-down predicting, controlling, and organizing that entire effort. Rather, there's a self-organizing process. Right? We have lots of different independent organizations and individuals in that system, each making local choices. I decide where to go, what to do, what to buy. The shopkeep decides what to order in his supply chain, and all of this happens independently of any top-down centralized control. We've long since learned as a human species that that kind of emergent self-organization in society works better than top-down control. It's more human, and it's more effective. It gets more things to the right people at the right time in the right place who need them than trying to predict and control it all from the top. Until we step into our modern company, and then it's like we're back in the feudal ages. Right? We're back to kings and barons and peasants and trying to control and organize a top-down economy. But there is a different way. There's a different paradigm. We experience it in our lives. Another great example, I think even more powerful than the city metaphor, look at the human body. Right? How many trillions of cells? Anyone know? I always forget the number. A lot of cells, all self-organizing together, and yet there's no boss cell. Right? There's no one cell telling the others what to do, where to be, how to organize. Yet there is order. There's a lot of order. Even the organ doesn't direct the cells within. It builds on top of their autonomy. Right? Every cell in my heart has its own inputs and outputs and its own self-organizing process, its own autonomy, sovereignty. And yet it's part of a larger organ, a heart. Right? And that heart does what it does by integrating the autonomy of lots of different players into a larger function, which itself is just a part of a cardiovascular system, a yet larger system. This is nature's way of scaling in the face of complexity. It's not top-down centralized control. It's lots of autonomy that gets integrated and aligned into a broader function. So what do we do if we want that in a company? I can tell you what not to do because that's where I started. My first thought was, let's just throw out the bosses, and that's a terrible idea. I also tried consensus. That was a terrible idea. We got to what I call the tyranny of consensus, where lots of people had voices, but we still couldn't adapt quickly, change things, clarify who does what. Throwing out bosses also doesn't get you there. The question is what to replace them with. All right, and I found something in my journey here, almost a little counterintuitive to me at first. If you want a system that has self-organizing, emergent order, where there's a lot of freedom for people to adapt locally, right, and self-organize together, you need some of the things that we often think of as getting in the way, and that often do get in the way in modern companies. Real empowerment, which is what this is about to me, if you want an empowering environment, it requires some things that we often think of as limiting empowerment. It requires boundaries and structure and rules, right? Let me say it this way. If you don't know what you can't do in a company, you don't know what you have the authority and freedom to do. And if you don't know the lines you can't cross, you don't know the freedom that you have to actually execute autonomously. So if you want an empowering environment, it's just as important to define the limits, right? In fact, if you're in an environment and somebody tells you there are no rules, there are no limits, do anything that makes sense to you, you probably won't believe them, right? I wouldn't. There's got to be some limits. There's got to be something I shouldn't do, right? If you don't know what that is, you actually don't know what freedom you have. Right? When you know exactly where the boundary is, you know the freedom you have. Right? When I know that I can't cross this line without checking with this person or going there or doing that, then I know what I can do without checking with anyone. Right? So counterintuitively, if you want a deeply empowering system, you do need a way to clarify boundaries, structures, rules, constraints. All of these things need clarity, right? Otherwise, you don't get an empowering system. You get a weird shadow power structure. The politics, the political systems we see in a lot of consensus-run organizations are a result of that. A lot of organizations that just try to throw out a management hierarchy without replacing it with another process end up with a shadow power structure. And they don't end up with a lot of people feeling autonomously empowered to go drive change. So let me show you a glimpse now of what Holacracy does to get this, to give you clarity on these, because we certainly don't want to get there the way the management hierarchy does. That's not very empowering. At least I don't think so in most cases. So here's Holacracy's approach. Holacracy is a role-based system. So the goal, or the process, I should say, of Holacracy defines these small, clear roles and then gives them clear authority, clear power. And unlike a typical job description, these roles they're not big. They're not your whole job. They're one micro piece. So this is one role I fill. I'm doing it right now, Holacracy spokesperson. I get to share this with the world. It's one of about 30 roles I fill in my company. It occupies maybe an hour a week or so, roughly, not even, of my time. So it's one tiny thing I do, and it has a clear purpose. Right? I'm here to crystallize and convey the Holacracy brand and reveal its why to the world. Why Holacracy? Right? And it has some clarity here of what others can expect of me. Right? But unlike the typical job description, which is often written in a vacuum by somebody removed from the people doing the work, this came from a learning process with my team as we worked together. So when we first created this role, it was nearly blank. We just knew we needed somebody going out there and speaking, right? So we created my spokesperson role, we gave it a purpose, and we didn't define or write down anything else. There were no accountabilities listed in this role. And then we started working together. And as we worked together, we learned. For example, the third accountability in this list, this tells my team members that they can expect from me that I will be defining criteria for acceptable speaking engagements. That came about because one of my colleagues in a different role many years ago was trying to book me for speaking engagements and found that she would do all this work negotiating with a potential conference or opportunity. And she'd present it to me at the end, and I'd say, no, wrong audience, or wrong market, or not big enough, not worth my time, whatever. And I'd turn it down. And she felt disempowered. She'd done all this work negotiating with these, and I was shooting them down at the end. Now, she did not feel like she could do her role in that kind of empowered way. So she brought that proposal to a process Holacracy adds where we can update these roles. So they're updated regularly in every team. And she said, I propose we add an accountability to your role. I need to expect from you that you'll define criteria up front so I can use that and self-assess which ones are worth pursuing before I waste a lot of time. Right, so we added that accountability on my role, and now she knows she can expect that from me. Right, so I know the expectations. I have more clarity, so does she. She's now empowered, and I know what I'm responsible for. But we didn't get there from a top-down design. We got there by her feeling disempowered, limited in her role, proposing something to change it. And now the other cool part of the story, I'm a founder of this organization. She was one of our newest hires. She was one of our newest team members to join. And she could put a new expectation on my role. How many organizations do you know? And it took about 5 minutes to get through that in the governance process in Holacracy that adds these accountabilities to roles. How many organizations do you know where the newest person to join can, in 5 minutes, propose and add an expectation on one of the founders, add a responsibility, and then show up and say, so I'm counting on you for that. When are you going to get it done? Right, or whatever. So the other piece of this, to have a truly empowering system, people need to know not just what's expected of them, but what authority they have. So the golden rule that Holacracy adds, when you have one of these clear roles that's dynamic, that's living and breathing from the team we're on, you have the authority in your role to make any decision or take any action as long as there's no rule against it. And that means a rule we've created in our governance process in our team together. So that's a huge amount of authority, of autonomy. Right? That means when I'm doing the spokesperson role and I'm serving that purpose of that role, I can make any decision I want. I can go mess with our anything in the company. I can change our slides. I can post a new event. I can sign up for some press. Who knows? Whatever. I can do anything that makes sense to me to get the job done. And so can everyone else in every role they fill. They do not need to bring it to a meeting. They do not need to get buy-in from anyone else. They don't need to socialize it and make sure everyone's comfortable. They simply already have authority. This is the opposite of the way most companies today work, where the implicit culture is don't do something out of what you ordinarily do unless you have permission. And you get permission usually by either asking the boss or socializing it to all your peers. And that takes a lot of time and energy. Holacracy turns that on its head. It says, as a fundamental rule of this game, if you have a role, you don't need permission, you don't need to socialize it, don't even ask, use your judgment, do whatever makes sense to you to get the job done. Just don't violate an explicitly defined rule that we've created together. If we need to slow you down, we will add some rules to do that. Right? If you're going so fast and being so entrepreneurial that you're creating lots of tension in others around you, great. We'll learn from that tension. We'll show up and we'll add constraints. Right? For example, one day early in our company's history, we had, with a lot of autonomy, a lot of empowered entrepreneurial role fillers who were updating our website, which worked great when we were 4 people. But as we grew, it started getting to be a little bit problematic to have anyone changing anything on our website anytime. And we realized we needed a rule about who could change the website and to control that process a little bit. So we created a web architect role. And then we can dynamically create these roles in every team as well. So we created a new role, and we gave it what we call a domain. So you'll see here, domain, the holacracy.org website, our main website. What a domain means is the property of this role. So what we did here was say, we don't want anyone just messing with the website at any time, so let's make it one role's property. We'll create a web architect role. It's currently filled by my colleague Olivier in the picture there. And his role controls our website. So if anyone else wants to mess with the website, ask his permission. The interesting thing here is this is centralizing control of the website, but in a decentralized system. But a lot like society. You know, I have centralized control of my house and my car, and my neighbor does the same of his house and his car. I know not to mess with his car without permission. He knows not to mess with mine without permission. Right? So we each have control of something, but it's distributed. We don't need a baron that we have to go look to for top-down permission. Right? I know I can decorate my house however I want. I don't need a neighborhood meeting to condone it. Right? It's my house. So Holacracy does the same. It clarifies these boundaries. Right? Who controls what? What are the limits? And until we've defined a limit, the default stance, use your judgment, be entrepreneurial, and do anything that makes sense to you to get your role's purpose met. Okay. Now, all of that really doesn't work unless you have a process to change these roles. If you try to define up front all the roles you need, it's a bureaucratic nightmare. You end up with a lot of definition that's just waste, a lot of text. You end up with something a lot like a job description. And honestly, when was the last time you ran to your job description every day for a week to get clarity on what you should do? When was the last time you looked up a colleague's job description to find out what you could really expect from them? Probably not. They're not useful. They are irrelevant often by the time they're written because it's somebody's design up front and it's not updated regularly. So to make this work, this level of clarity, it needs to be lightweight up front, nearly empty, and it needs to evolve by doing the work together. And you need to constantly evolve it as you learn together. What do we need to expect from each other? What control needs to be centralized where? So with Holacracy, we do that with a process, right? If we want that kind of process, anyone needs to be able to change any role, any accountability, any property right, any boundary in the system at any time, driven by real work they're doing. So Holacracy gets there by adding what we call a governance process into every team. Right? So every circle, we call them, circle contains a bunch of roles, right? And every circle invites anyone filling a role in that team, in that circle, shows up in a governance meeting regularly, maybe once a month or so, and they can propose changing any other role, any rule operating in that team. So this is our outreach circle pictured here. It's our marketing circle, basically. And in that circle is our web architect, is my spokesperson role. My colleague that books my speaking engagements, that's our casting agent role. That's in that circle as well. Right? We all come together into this governance meeting regularly. And this governance meeting is happening in every single team. So it's not just a top-down process itself. It's every team invites anyone on that team to show up and govern. And what we do in the governance meeting, we're not making specific decisions, right? We're not deciding what paragraph should we post on our homepage of our website. We're just defining who controls the website. We're not defining how they're going to use that authority. We're not defining what slides I'm going to use in my talks. We're just defining I have a spokesperson role, and I got to figure out what slides I'm going to use. So we're breaking down the structure of the organization. We're defining the roles, what's expected of them, and what rules we need to honor, so that outside of the meeting, we can execute without needing a meeting. Right? So this is an interesting paradox. Holacracy uses the governance meeting to remove the need for operational meetings. Right? So we have this process of clarifying the expectations and boundaries and constraints so that we can just go and execute without checking in with everybody, without building consensus, without going to a meeting to make every decision. And we have a high degree of autonomy. And yet, when that autonomy causes tension, we don't just leave it, we learn from it. We come back to the governance process and we learn from it. What are we learning about the expectations we need to hold of each other to serve our overall purpose here? That's what we're doing in this governance process. And what's driving change in that process is not people's good ideas. That leads really quickly to over-design, like the job description. If you want to see a poorly designed circle with Holacracy, just have people go and design what they think is a good design. You'll end up with a terrible one. And I say that from experience. I've over-designed a lot of organizations in my days as a CEO. And what I learned is no matter how smart I was, I just could not beat an evolutionary process at designing my organization. So with Holacracy, one of the core rules, we're not driving the design. We're not coming and designing the roles we need. We're just working together, and we're seeing where the tension is. Right? Use tension to drive change. And I don't mean tension in a negative way. Sometimes you can get frustrated with the tension, but you can also get excited. Tension here is simply the feeling you get when you sense a gap between what is and what could be. Right? So it could be an opportunity. It could be something exciting you want to get better at. It could be something just fell through the cracks or exploded on you. But whatever it is, you have a tension of wanting to improve something. So the driver of change in this whole system, what tensions are you feeling? Let's drive the design of our organization, of the role structure, and of the expectations through that. Which lets us build a whole system in this self-organizing, emergent way. So here's an org chart, Holacracy style. This is my company. At least it was at one point. It looks different today. This is roles within circles within larger circles. So you have bigger circles that group and integrate the work of sub-circles, which group and integrate the work of the roles within. Every one of those circles is holding regular governance meetings and self-organizing how that circle works. Every role filler, everyone filling one of those green roles in there, has autonomy. There's no boss, there's no management hierarchy. This is a replacement for the management hierarchy. There is no bosses, there are no managers, there's no CEO, there's nothing like that. There's no one to counteract your decisions, bless your decisions, approve of your decisions, or disapprove. It's just you. You have a role, you have authority, you have autonomy, you have empowerment, real empowerment. You don't need a boss that empowers you, which frankly, if you need a boss to empower you, you're in a very disempowering system, even if you have a boss that empowers you. This is a system that empowers. This is a system that allows everyone to use real power because they have a role, they have a purpose to fill, there's a rule of the basic rules of the game that define that. Right? Really different way of running an organization than a top-down management hierarchy. It's being used in somewhere over 1,000 organizations all over the world today. The largest entire organization to do it across the whole company right now is Zappos. This is a picture of their org chart. There are literally thousands of little dots of roles in there and hundreds of circles. There are about 1,600 employees. And interesting to note, this structure, I went in and looked at it recently, it looks totally different than when I took this screenshot many months ago because it's evolving, right? It's changing. They're reinventing themselves continually. They're self-organizing, right? Every cell in my body didn't exist not that long ago. They're constantly regenerating and shifting and changing. In this case, the circles look totally different now. The roles are different. It's evolving, it's adapting, it's processing tensions in every one of those circles. Living, breathing, organic system is what this creates. And finally, to make all of that work, I look at this kind of like a game or a sport, and you need a good rule book. So this is the final way of getting power out of the management hierarchy and into a process. And it's with a rule book. So we have a constitution that defines the power structure of Holacracy. This is what replaces CEO-driven management hierarchy power. Instead of a CEO at the top of a hierarchy who has all ultimate power in the organization, when a company is using Holacracy, ultimate power rests in a constitution that defines the governance process that we can all use to break down the roles and define who has what power, what authority, and what role. So the first move an organization makes when they want to adopt Holacracy, if they're coming from a conventional CEO-driven hierarchy, the CEO signs a declaration ceding the CEO's power into that rulebook, the Holacracy Constitution. Kind of like a king saying, I'm no longer going to be a king above the law. Instead, I'm signing in a constitutional process to govern this entity. It's kind of like that. It's a big leap, big jump. Of course, the CEO retains the right, at least until they adopt it in their legal bylaws, which some have done. But until then, they retain the right to throw it out. If this isn't working, if it's not serving your organization, get rid of it and go back to something that does. The point of this isn't just to be egalitarian or be self-organizing because it's cool. It's because we want a better way to express the purpose of our company. And that's what this is for. It's meant to be a practical tool. So if it's not working, throw it out. If it is working, keep doing it. But the CEO's commitment is until or unless I decide to actually throw it out, you can hold me to these rules. I am bound by the same law of the land as anyone else. Right? And I'll do my best to enact those rules with you, and I have no special authority and no special privilege as the former CEO. You can find that rulebook on our website. It's an open source document, the Holacracy Constitution. It's version controlled and managed just like an open source software project. We're on version 4.1, which means it's a generic document. The 1,000 companies in the world, more than that now, doing this, they don't each write their own constitution. That would take many years and be a massive challenge, trust me from experience. They use the generic standard one. So what Holacracy does, what it offers, is a generic packaged system to bring self-organization into your enterprise. You can adopt this constitution, learn its rules of the game. Of course, that's not easy to do. It's a huge change, but it's doable. And once you learn the new rules of the game, you can self-organize your whole system. Now, because it's a generic document, it's not telling you the answer to how you should organize your company. It's giving you the process to do that. Right? It's not telling you you should have an outreach circle and a spokesperson role and a casting agent role and a web architect role. It doesn't tell you any of that. You have to do the hard work of organizing your own business. It doesn't tell you how to hire people, how to fire people. It doesn't tell you how to compensate people, how to budget. And none of those are defined by the Constitution. All it does is give you the meta framework. It says, What tensions do you have? Do you have a tension about how we pay people? Well, here's a governance process. The Constitution defines your governance process. Propose something. It's up to you to do the hard work of figuring out how that should work in your company. The Constitution just gives you a forum where everybody can go to evolve the design of your company. That's it. So it doesn't answer many of the hard questions, and it's not a one-size-fits-all in that sense. Every organization running with Holacracy looks so unique, but what unites them is a meta process to figure out the design of their company. They're using the same governance rules to get there, and that's what Holacracy ultimately is. It's that meta rule set. So to summarize, and then we'll move into some Q&A. To summarize some of the key shifts here, we're shifting from static job descriptions, the kind that are written in a vacuum by often somebody removed from those doing the work, to dynamic roles, little roles, micro roles. You get tons of roles, a dozen roles or more. And the roles change constantly. They're dynamic. They're the outputs of a learning process as we learn how to work together. And if there's no tension, we don't spend any time documenting anything. The documentation of this happens by actually solving real issues, real tensions that are in the way of our work. And we're learning from them and encoding that learning. This is true organizational learning. It's encoded in the design of the roles of the organization. It's a shift from delegating authority down a management hierarchy, CEO holds authority and delegates it, to a constitutional authority paradigm, where power is held in a process, not by a person. So it's a shift from power being held personally by the charismatic leader, the boss, the heroic leader at the top that we all look to empower us and be a good parent to the organization, to a shift that says maybe we can all be adults together. Maybe we don't need a heroic leader at the top empowering us. Maybe we can simply just show up as adults, using a process, playing a game together of how we're going to serve the purpose of this organization and change its design to do that better over time. And that authority is encoded in a constitution that everyone can see, and we're all held to the same rules of the game. Which means we're shifting from the big reorg that happens in a lot of large organizations, especially every couple of years, to a constant reorg. It's a micro reorg, and it's tension driven. We are iterating on the design. We're trying stuff, keeping what works, changing what doesn't. Change becomes the norm. We are constantly iterating on the design of our company through a framework, a process, a governance process that everyone knows how to use once you get them up to speed. And that means we can align differently. We can use those rules. We can use that process, and we don't have to play the politics. We don't have to socialize decisions. We don't have to call the meeting to make sure everyone's bought in, or pull a favor with our friend from accounting to get something done. Instead, we can show up at a transparent governance process and propose what we need to expect from each other. I remember my example of my brand new colleague who proposed a new accountability on my role. She didn't need to play politics. She didn't need to get me bought in and socialize it. She just needed to go to governance and say, I need to expect this from your role. I propose we add this accountability. And by the rules of our governance process in Holacracy, it's a pretty cool process. I don't even get to say yes, sure, or no. All I get to do, the only question I'm asked in that, do I see a reason why adding that accountability will cause harm or move us backwards? Not do I like it, not do I agree with it, not do I want to do it, just do I see a reason it will cause harm? And if I do, the burden of proof, of argument, is on me. And there's some rules for that process. So it's not a consensus-based process at all. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's the opposite of consensus. In consensus, you have to get everyone bought in before a change can be made. In this, the change is automatically accepted unless someone else can present an argument for why it will cause harm. And then it doesn't shoot down the change. It just gives us a creative puzzle to solve. Right? It just gives us a brainstorming to have on how we can adopt the change without causing that harm. If you want to see a governance meeting in action, we have a recording of a little simulated governance meeting on our website in our resources section. So you can find that there and kind of see how that process works. You can also read about it in my book, which has kind of a few scenarios and kind of walks you through it as if you're in the meeting. So that's probably the best resource to get a better sense of that process. So all that to say, that's why I call Holacracy a new social technology. It is an end-to-end replacement for power being vested in a person at the top of a hierarchy who breaks it down, to shift power to a process that everyone has access to, that is distributed, self-organizing, that decentralizes power into a system that allows emergent order in place of top-down predicted and controlled order. So that's Holacracy in a nutshell. That said, it's a real challenge to get there. This is the most significant change initiative I think I've ever seen in my career, because you're changing things at such a deep level. So if you're interested in this, I'd really encourage you get all the support you can. This is a hard change. You can start with the book, of course, and read about it. It's really hard to adopt from just reading about it. There's a lot of free resources on our website. You can use those. It really helps to have a good coach. If you're interested in Holacracy coaching, you can find a list of providers, including my own organization, on our website. We have licensees in all different territories around the world. So check our website to find out where you can get a coach. It really helps, like playing any new sport. You're going to learn it much faster and without nearly as much pain if you have a good coach playing the game with you. If you can't do that, consider getting to a training. There's a list of trainings on our website as well, holacracy.org. Go on there, click on trainings. We have a deep 4.5-day deep dive training on how to facilitate Holacracy's processes, get into the rule set of it much more, the paradigm shift of it. There's the next one's coming up. Actually, I think it's either sold out or we have like one seat left. So if anyone's really motivated, it's in a couple of weeks in Amsterdam. After that, we're coming to Philadelphia in, I think it's March. You'll find that on our website. After that, we're back in Amsterdam in May, and we'll be in the Bay Area sometime later in the year as well. So check our website for all of those. If you can't get training, you don't have any budget to get training or to get a good coach, then just do what you can with the book and the free resources on the web. There's a community of practice. You have a lot of experienced coaches available to you in that community. And finally, use GlassFrog, which is the tool that I took all the screenshots of roles that you see today out of. It's a tool meant to support companies doing Holacracy. And it also now has a module that walks you through the habits you need to build to do Holacracy well. So if you check that out, there's a free version and a paid version. The paid version has all of that support to build your habits of Holacracy. The free version at least gives you the basics. So check that out on our website as well, or go to glassfrog.com. So hope that leaves you some next steps to dig deeper and dive in. If you want a little bit of a next step, we also do little taster workshops occasionally. You'll find them on the website. They give you a simulation of the governance process and one of our other processes in Holacracy. If you want a bit of a taste before diving in deeper, that's another option for you. If you have any questions, reach out. I've got some time here for Q&A, but if I don't get to one of your questions or you want to talk to us about getting support doing Holacracy in your company, reach out. We have a whole coaching program to walk you through it, and would love to talk to you about it. So for those that are dropping off now, thanks for joining us. And for those that want to stick around for some Q&A, please type your questions not into the chat. I might not see them there. The chat goes by pretty quick. So go to the Q&A tab. You should see a Q&A button. I'll be answering questions from there. So type your questions in the Q&A. And let's see what we've got. Let's see. First question is a bit of a technical question. So in the governance process in Holacracy, we have a reaction round where everybody can share a reaction about Holacracy. Sorry, about the proposal on the table, I mean. And the question is, how long do you allow for the reactions in the reaction round? I imagine some people would go on and on. Actually, it doesn't happen. It's one of the most common questions I get. Doesn't happen in practice. If you facilitate the process well, you ignore it, and it self-corrects, because somebody that's talking and droning on, when everyone else ignores them and no one responds, they kind of feel like an idiot, and they don't do it again. So common question, but in practice, I almost never see it being an issue. And that's after thousands of meetings. It's almost never an issue. And if you have more like detailed practice questions like that of how do I do this in Holacracy right, great forum for that is our community of practice. You can post them there. Or if you want to ask them of an experienced coach like myself, if you are a user of our GlassFrog software, we have Holacracy Coach Office Hours. And any user we have regular office hours, can sign up and ask real questions of really experienced Holacracy coaches live. So questions like that, if you're doing this, great resource you can take advantage of there. All right, let's see. Another question here. Can this work for volunteer organizations? I don't see why not. If everyone wants to get to goals, I think you're right. We've actually worked with several volunteer organizations or nonprofits that use volunteers as a significant percentage of their work staff. And what I hear reported from them is it helps a lot to have a way to coordinate volunteers and to let them process tensions better. So some of them let volunteers show up in their governance process and actually improve things themselves instead of just complaining about it. And some of them don't have the volunteers integrated into governance, but they at least give them clear roles, which tends to get more out of volunteers when they know more clearly what's expected. And it helps the volunteer coordinators know what roles I need filled and helps them find the right fits for the right roles. You can have a more rich discussion with your volunteers when you have more clarity of the work that needs to get done. So lots of volunteer-based organizations and other nonprofits do use Holacracy. In short, it works for any company that has a purpose to express and needs to organize work to get there. It is as broadly applicable as the management hierarchy. Right? It's a generic meta system. The management hierarchy works in all different industries, all different types of companies, all different sizes, all different sectors, because it's not giving you a specific answer to how to structure. It's giving you the meta framework for how to break down power and define your structure. Holacracy is in the same category. Right? It is broadly applicable because it's not telling you what to do in your company. It's just giving you the meta framework of how to break down power and clarify and define how things work around here. You still get to do the hard work of answering those questions and defining your own unique structure. It's just a meta framework. That's it. Let's see, other questions. Is there a best practice training process used to orient new employees? Yes, definitely. And when we work with an organization to coach them, that's part of what we tend to help with. There's several different options there. Probably without getting into too much detail, the one I'll point you to, Glassfrog, that software tool, now this is literally just shipped last night. If you're on our premium Glassfrog account, you can have every new person who joins your company, every new employee, automatically kicked off through a 6-month onboarding program of getting key Holacracy-based habits to focus on and lessons that show up in their inbox every couple of days. So they're focused on building all of the habits and skills they need to do this effectively. A really powerful program. It's been fundamentally transformative for the clients we've used it with, and it really helps with onboarding. So check that out. Really useful there. And also consider getting a good coach who can help you with that further as well. Going to a training helps as well, but that's not for everyone. You often want a few key people in your company to go through our deeper training, and then they get the job of orienting new people as well with maybe some internal workshops and things like that. All right, next question. How do you keep track of the distributed expectations? How does one know what other roles are and what are the expectations on them? Not to sound like a broken record, but that is the point of our Glassfrog software. In fact, let me just show it to you, and you can kind of see in real time what that looks like. So this is Glassfrog, our software tool. This is my organization, Holacracy One, and this is our circle structure. So here's our general company circle. That's our kind of main operational circle. And then we have different circles in here, like our training circle here. And there's different roles. Like I fill our trainer role. I along with Nick, lead most of our deeper trainings. So I can go in here and I can find other roles. Like, maybe as a trainer, I want to know what I can count on from the person booking the venue for my training. Well, here's a venue contracting role filled by Rebecca. And I have some accountabilities I can expect from her here. Right? Or maybe I want to know, what about training design? What can I count on, or what can someone else count on from me? I fill that role too, along with my colleague Chris. Well, here's what they can expect from me in my training design role. I can search here as well. So if I want to know, what roles have something to do with our website, right? Great. Well, here's every role and every policy in our company that references website and who can do what with a website. Or, what about compensation? How does compensation work in our company? Right? Every company is going to have their own answer, but I at least can search and find anything to do with compensation here. So it gives me a lot. I can see the different circles I'm in. I can track my tensions in here. And here's the tensions I've got currently in my organization. And I can actually build a proposal in advance if I want to. So I can, let's see. Here's a proposal. So I can build a proposal and send it around to my colleagues. And in this case, it was sent out, waiting for responses. This is a way to do governance outside of the meetings to make it more efficient. If one of my colleagues wants to discuss this in a meeting, they can escalate it to a meeting, and then we'll talk about it in that meeting. So lots of useful tools in here for tracking things and for doing Holacracy. This is used by the vast majority of companies today doing Holacracy use this tool, and it's really useful. So that's a bit about that. All right, let's see what other questions we've got here. Let's see. I see another question here. How does Holacracy relate to Elliott Jack's theory of requisite organization? Man, I have more to say about this than I can fit in a quick answer. I would say in some ways a lot and in some ways little. So Holacracy bakes in a piece of Elliott Jack's theory that he was never able to figure out how to put in practice, which is clarifying what he called the more peer-based expectations. He never found a good way to actually clarify who can initiate a task request from who in parallel on a team. It really answers that. It answers it beautifully. It also meets some of his principles about clarity. That said, it doesn't relate to some of his more popular methods directly about how to structure task breakdown, since it's moving away from the management hierarchy, and his work was really based on management hierarchy. So there's more I could say, but I'll leave it at that for now. All right, let's see. Can Holacracy be deployed within a business unit or department if the organization is not ready to embrace it enterprise-wide? Yes, absolutely. And if you try that, you're in for a challenge, but it's doable, and there are organizations doing it. There are teams within some very large, recognizable global brands right now. In fact, there's even a team doing it in 2 different governments. 2 different actual state governments have teams doing Holacracy or departments doing Holacracy. And talk about big bureaucratic organization around you, but it's being done. There's a lot. A lot I can say about the challenges of that. It's hard, but it's possible. It's kind of like you have a translation. It's almost like your department, if you do this, is going to speak another language, and you need to translate constantly between the broader business language and your language, which is a challenge, but a manageable one. All you need is some manager in the management hierarchy that's there now that has the authority to say, in my department or team or whatever, we are no longer using the old rules of management hierarchy. We are adopting the Holacracy Constitution. And that's what's happened in several of these departments I'm referencing now. It's some manager that said, I have enough political capital to say, in my department, we're using the rules of the Holacracy Constitution to organize, and I will deal with and navigate the boundary and translate for the rest of the company when needed and all that. So very possible, just another layer of challenge. All right. So let's see, can you apply this approach to all types of organizations? I think I covered that. Where is it impossible to implement? I can speak a little more to this. I do think it's really broadly, it's as broad as the management hierarchy, but that's not to say every organization can make the leap. The ones I see it really successful in, the biggest predictor is the manager at the top of the hierarchy who's adopting the Constitution, usually the CEO if it's the whole company, or the department head if it's a department or whatever. It really comes down to that person. Is that person really ready to learn themselves a new way to play the game of business, right? Are they ready to learn a new set of rules, to influence and lead differently? Because this will require them looking in the mirror, seeing patterns and habits that they've built of how they've led, and ones that might have worked really well for them and their team, and yet still need to be changed and let go of. So it takes a very self-aware leader. Doesn't matter whether you're in a public company, private company, small, large, for-profit, nonprofit, government, whatever. If you have that leader, its success factors go up tremendously. The success rate is much higher. It's hard, and it takes a leader that can do that. So that's what I see as the biggest point. The other thing I'd say is that leader looking for a short-term quick fix, or are they looking to invest in a long-term transformation? This is not a good choice for a quick fix. There are far better options. If you've got tactical issues and you're not trying for transformation to set you up for the next several years, you're trying for what can I do in the next several months to get better results, this is not your tool. This requires an investment. It is a change, a deep, deep change. It's to set up your organization for a totally different paradigm over years. It takes years to master. You can start getting results with it, but it's not going to pay back the investment cost to get there for at least 6 months, right? So don't use this as a quick fix. Realize you're in for a transformation and expect that. Expect it to be hard at first, not easy. If this were easy, it would not have the potential to be transformative. Everyone would already be doing something like it. This is difficult. So go in eyes wide open. That's the big success factor here to pay attention to. Do you have a leader ready for that, both in their own self-awareness and their own willingness and readiness to change themselves? And are they signing up for this for a long-term transition, transformation, not just a quick fix? All right, let's see. Would implementing subcircles in an organization of 6 members hinder? Yeah, it's one of the most common mistakes I see made in small companies. They end up defining subcircles when they don't need them. If you have a 6-member organization, I almost guarantee you have one circle. That's it, no subcircles needed. What you have is a bunch of roles within that circle. So often people in the beginning think they need a subcircle whenever they have a group that works together, and you don't. You need clear roles that are all working together within a larger circle. So if you've got a small team, less than 10 people, you want to start with one circle, no more. From there, you'll figure out when you need a subcircle, but don't start with it. It'll slow down everything and hinder your adoption. It makes it a mess, and it makes it much less likely to stick and succeed. So in the beginning, start small. Start with lots of roles, sure, but not lots of circles. That said, there are exceptions to every rule, and a good coach could work you through that and kind of help you figure out what's right for you. All right. Will a version of the Constitution be published soon in Spanish? Sorry, excuse me. Yes, we do have translated versions of the Constitution in many languages now. I think Spanish is one of them. Check our website. If you don't see it there, send us a request. Go into our Contact Us on our website and send us a question. We'll send you an answer. There are many translations, several more in the works. I don't remember which ones are there, but Spanish is possibly one of them. So check it out. Let's see. If a company has 10,000 people, how can you apply the change? One step at a time, one team, one department at a time. You find a really good starting point, a guinea pig team or department that has that leader I described at the top ready to do this and ready to go through all sorts of interesting challenges as they navigate the broader company's HR systems and policies and all this other stuff that's going to push back and fight the change. When you adopt this in a big company, expect the corporate antibodies to come out and attack the foreign invader. You need a leader ready to sign up for that. And if you've got that leader, you start on that team and you learn. And then you do it in another team, another department, and you learn. That's how it has been spread so far in the multi-hundred person companies doing it. Once you get above about 300 people, you can't just do it all at once. It doesn't work. Even 200 people. So you've got to go kind of department at a time. All right, and get a good coach. If you're signing up for that kind of challenge, you need help. All right, let's see what else. We're working in an organization where people are constantly coming and leaving a school. Is it possible to use Holacracy? It is. It just has its own unique challenges. Probably you want to get to a training and use that to better understand what some of those challenges are and assess how to do it. But it is used in a couple of schools now. It just gives its own challenges. And you really need good onboarding and maybe some other things to support that as well. Okay, let's see. Let's see, I don't quite understand. A technical question, how a lead link in an anchor circle defines the purpose of the organization. Not sure I totally understand. It looks like the question might have gotten cut off here through part of it. So if you have questions like this that are about the rules of the game, you obviously need to know something about Holacracy a little more than this isn't your first experience, or you wouldn't be asking that question. Try asking that in our community of practice. You'll get a better answer than I can give you in a minute here anyway. Or sign up for our Glassfrog office hours and ask a coach live, and you can actually get a dialogue around it. So it's the best places to go with technical questions about Holacracy like that. All right, let's see. Other questions. In order to start a process like these, what is the first approach with your people? So what do you do first if you want to adopt this? So it depends. One of the first steps we take with organizations. When you've got some champion in the organization that's interested in this, but you need to get the broader team on board, the executive team or whatever. Sometimes that champion is the CEO, but wants to get his kind of key team on board before doing it. Or sometimes it's a member of that team that wants to help the team test it out. We offer a 2-day workshop we do with teams like that. We call it a discovery session. It's basically it's a much easier sell for your team than change our whole power structure and throw out all the managers. Instead, it's take 2 days and experience a new way of organizing. And at the end of the 2 days, you can keep doing things as you have been, or maybe you know what this is about and you want to take next steps with Holacracy. So what I do in cases like that, don't try to sell someone on adopting all of Holacracy. Just focus on, do you want to take 2 days, do a little retreat of sorts, try it out. And what we do in those 2 days is run your team through a governance meeting of Holacracy and our other key meeting process, a tactical meeting, using your real issues. And we put your real structure into Glassfrog and we get your roles set up. And so it's like a real taste of what this would really be like for your real team with your real issues. And if you do decide to move forward with Holacracy after that, you have a lot more buy-in to start from. And it's also kind of a prep for launch because we tackle some key issues that you need to get set up to actually launch Holacracy successfully. So that's a really good starting point. It's talk to us if you're interested in more about that. Great first step, 2-day workshop with a key team to experience Holacracy hands-on with your real stuff. That's one of the first steps we make. After that, or once the team is really clear, we definitely want to do this, we're all signed up and the CEO or whoever is ready to sign the Constitution, then there's a whole rollout process. And it happens really quick. It's not a lengthy prep. It's pretty much dive in and we're going to learn by doing. So when we coach a company, we facilitate the governance meetings and the tactical meetings for the first several months as we train your internal facilitators. And we're doing a lot of coaching in those meetings. So the process is really go and do it. We get an initial structure set up in Glassfrog as fast as possible. That might take a week or two to get done. And then it's go. Run the meetings, schedule the governance, and start doing it and learn by playing the game. Right? It's like learning a sport. You're not going to learn about it by reading the rule book. Whatever you do, don't go distribute the Holacracy Constitution and tell people to read it. That would be like if you wanted to learn soccer, distributing the official FIFA rule book for soccer. It's 144 pages, and no one learns to play soccer by reading that rule book. Don't do it. It's a reference, not a learning tool. So instead, you learn to play soccer by getting on the field with a coach and playing the game. And the same thing is ideal with Holacracy. Whether the coach is external, like we offer, or whether you train someone internally and they do the coaching, you start it with a good coach to kind of walk people through and learn as you go. So that's the goal here, and that's kind of the details. There's more to it. We have a whole assessment process we use to kind of monitor progress over time. There's some setup with that, but talk to us if you're interested in more about our coaching services. All right, let's see. I have time for a few more. Let's see. I'm trying to find ones I haven't already hit on here. Does it work with nonprofits? I think I covered that, absolutely. In fact, it really helps. I've seen many nonprofits, maybe you've experienced this too, have boards of directors that are often dysfunctionally involved. And Holacracy has been massively beneficial at the board level for a lot of nonprofits by helping their directors either avoid the tyranny of consensus, as I call it, which happens on a lot of nonprofits, or find appropriate ways to engage while still empowering and not disempowering the people working in the nonprofit. It can be tremendously powerful at the board level for a nonprofit. Also in the operations and all that as well. But, and Holacracy is a purpose-driven system. Nonprofits are already purpose-driven, right? So kind of a natural match. It's now a system to take that purpose and operationalize it and figure out how to break it down and make sure everything's aligned with that purpose I think much more gracefully than a management hierarchy does. All right, let's see. What else do we have? Okay, so a question about compensation. Who will be responsible for salary and raises and talking about that? Holacracy does not tell you how to deal with compensation. It only gives you the governance process so you can decide how compensation should work in your company. Again, Holacracy is a meta framework. That's it. Doesn't tell you how to hire, how to fire, how to compensate. But it does let you define the roles. So if you want one person responsible for deciding everybody's salary, you can do that. It's maybe not the best approach that I've seen, but you can do it. You can create one role, compensation master, who defines everyone else's compensation. Now, that's not usually the best approach for encouraging a distributed, decentralized system, but you can do it. Same thing with firing. I had one organization we worked with created a role called the executioner, and they gave that role the authority to fire anyone in the company. It was a fine starting point, and it wasn't even a bad idea because that's what they had in the management hierarchy before they adopted. So they just started where they were. Right? They didn't try to change everything day one. They said, in the past, our CEO has had the authority to fire anyone, and that's what's happened. So we'll just create a role and make that really clear. We'll call the role the executioner even, make it really clear. But then things start to change. So let me ask the question a different way. In your organization, have you ever had any tension about the way people get paid or fired or hired or budgeting's done? Right? Do you have a way to change the process when you feel a tension? Right? In this organization, that's how things had always been done, but nobody had a way to change the way they were fired until they adopted Holacracy and they defined a role that had the autocratic authority to fire anyone. It wasn't too long before someone had some tension about that and said, I think we ought to change the way this works, and they proposed a change. And that change can be small at first. It can be maybe instead of one person who decides firing or compensation, maybe we want 3 people filling the role, and at least 2 of them have to agree to a change. That'd be one approach. Eventually, what you get to, often when you keep doing this for a while, is a completely novel approach to doing these things. In our company, my company, we have a compensation system that is totally decentralized, distributed, peer-to-peer. Our compensation is based on badges we earn, and badges recognize skills that we've demonstrated to our peers that we're adding value with. And there's a transparent database of which badges get you which compensation. And there's a process to earn new badges that's peer assessed. There's a way to propose new badges in the library of badges, new skills to be recognized. So in our system, we have this really novel approach. No one person, no group of people decides pay. It's a self-organizing, emergent process, peer-to-peer, decentralized. But you don't have to start with that. Start where you are. If where you are is one person decides everyone's pay, fine, do that. And then let the tensions drive the changes and evolve it. So the goal of Holacracy is not to instantly make every process in your system completely self-organizing. It's to give you the meta framework that lets you drive change to over time evolve to a more self-organizing system that works for your unique company and culture. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It does not give you, here's your one way to do compensation, your one way to fire people, your one way to do budgeting. It gives you the process to evolve your own ways. So that said, you can steal ideas from people that have been there before. You can go see my company's approach to compensation. It's all public on the web. Our Glassfrog records, our entire governance records in my company are public on the web, and you can find them linked from our main website in the footer. So you can go see how we do it, and you can try that. You can steal it, change it, do whatever makes sense to you. In our community of practice, we have people posting standard approaches for things like firing and hiring and budgeting, and you can copy from them. One of the really cool things about the broader Holacracy community is that you have this kind of shared learning. How can we do compensation better than just one person decides it? Right? And there's companies experimenting with that and sharing their learning with others in a common language. And that's what Holacracy gives you, a common language. They can say, here are the roles involved, and here are the accountabilities on those roles, here are the policies. And that's all within a framework that's giving you a basic definition of these terms. So I look at Holacracy more as giving you the language to talk about these things in a more concrete way that lets you copy ideas from different companies. All right, hope that gave you a sense of that. I know it's kind of a non-answer, but that's the truth of it. There isn't one answer to that. Holacracy gives you a way to find your own answer or to copy from others who have. All right. Is there space, another question, is there space for feedback into an individual's quality of work? Right? So if work isn't meeting the standard expected, how can that be addressed? Sounds like a tension. So this is my way of dodging almost any question I get asked about Holacracy, but it's still a true answer. Sounds like a tension. Do you have tension about how people generally give feedback into other people's work? Propose something. Holacracy isn't there to spoon feed you an answer. It's there to say, hey, if you've got a tension, propose something. Maybe you want to propose a feedback process of some sort? Maybe a role that hosts feedback channels. I don't know. Maybe you want to propose some 360 feedback process. Or maybe you just want to go talk to somebody and give them your feedback. You can still do that too. Remember the golden rule of Holacracy: if you have a role and it would serve your purpose, you can make any decision or take any action to get the job done. And that includes going and talking to someone. So if it would serve your role's purpose to go give someone feedback, go give them feedback. Right? And now if you want a more formal process for that, or you want to expect something from them, now you can go to that governance meeting and you can say, I want to expect something from someone. I find a lot of the times we say someone isn't meeting our expectations, when you dig in, you find your expectations are implicit and not shared. So the first line of defense with Holacracy, make sure their role actually has that expectation on it. Right? If their role isn't accountable for that, you have no right to expect it. So first, clarify the expectation. Then if it's still not delivering the standards you need, great, now process that tension. Maybe you need to change the person filling the role. There's another process that can do that. There's a way to change people filling roles. So that's sometimes the case, but sometimes you just need a way to give them feedback better. And who knows? Again, Holacracy doesn't give you a one-size-fits-all answer. It just gives you channels to process tensions. The goal of Holacracy in a nutshell is any tension anywhere in the system sensed by any person needs a place to go to get rapidly and reliably processed into meaningful change. So that's the goal of Holacracy. It's not to tell you how to solve the tensions. It's to give you the framework, the meta framework, so that anyone, anywhere in the company who senses a tension can get it processed into meaningful change, right? So that that low voltage light doesn't get outvoted, so that anyone can drive change in the system. You still have to do the hard work yourself of figuring out what changes are going to serve well and what changes aren't, and sometimes that just takes experimentation. And let's see one more. Can you implement Holacracy without Glassfrog? It's almost impossible. It has been done successfully in a very small handful of cases, but the failure rate is incredibly high. So my advice, don't try it. There's a free version of Glassfrog. You don't have to pay a dime for it, and it at least improves your chances of success quite a bit. The paid version of Glassfrog, it's still pretty cheap, $6 per user per month. Gets you access to lots of Holacracy expertise in our Holacracy habit building program and lots of other premium features that help a lot, and that further ups your odds of success quite a bit. So I would not recommend trying it. In fact, my company has walked away from six-figure consulting deals because for whatever reason, they wanted to home grow their own tool instead of using Glassfrog, and it just ups the odds of failure so much, we won't take the coaching. It just signs us up for supporting a company that's probably set up to fail. So don't do that. Just use Glassfrog. Cool. All right. Well, we are out of time for our webinar today. So if I didn't get to your question, please do send it in, email us, go to our website, hit contact us. We're happy to get you directed to someone to answer your question, or go into our community. You can find a link in our website to community. Post the question there. You'll get lots of interesting answers from our broader community. And if there's anything we can do to support your journey with Holacracy, please reach out and let us know. We'd love to help you and love to hear your comments. So thanks for joining. I hope I've succeeded at giving you at least a glimpse, a whirlwind tour of a radically different way to organize. My personal purpose in life, I capture as I show people a radical new way to organize power. And I hope you've gotten a glimpse of a radical new way to organize power in a company. So thanks a lot, everyone, and have a great day.